Welcome back to Dark Cinema Recaps, where horror is for life, not just for October. Today we have got our last 6 weeks worth of videos, all put together, the entire Nightmare on Elm Street 1 through 6. Join us next week for we are going to be covering Wes Craven's New Nightmare, then after that, the 2010 remake, for better or for worse. But there is a Freddy vs. Jason sized elephant in the room. So the Freddy vs. Jason one is going to be going live once the Friday the 13th franchise is all finished, and then we can kind of all tick them off accordingly, and that will be the main showdown at the end of the Friday 13th franchise when we have finished recapping that. Teenager Tina Gray awakens from a terrifying nightmare in which a disfigured man wearing a blade-fixed glove attacks her in a boiler room. Her mother points out 4 mysterious slashes on her nightgown. The following morning, Tina's best friend Nancy Thompson and Nancy's boyfriend Glenn Lance console her, revealing that they each also had a nightmare the previous night. The two stay at Tina's house when Tina's mother goes out of town, where Nancy also confesses to having a nightmare about a disfigured man. Tina's boyfriend, Rod Lane, interrupts their sleepover with a fucking switchblade as well, psychopath. Tina and Rod have honky. When Tina falls asleep, she dreams of a stretchy-armed, melty-faced, disfigured man chasing her like he's a drunk uncle going in for that cheeky squeeze. No, your upbringing was weird, but after the incident, I didn't see Uncle Jim for years. I always wonder what happened to him.
Rod is awakened by Tina's thrashing and sees her being dragged around the room like Tina's a stress ball and Big Fred hasn't had a wank for 3 months.
Big Rod also gets thundercunted in that process too, doesn't he? My God!
What hell of a smack!
I know, she just head twats the fuck out of him, man!
Then, fatally slashed and tossed onto the bed in a pool of her own blood. Rod is forced to flee as Nancy and Glenn are awakened to find Tina bloodied and dead. The next day, Nancy's policeman father, Don Thompson, arrests Rod despite his pleas of innocence. At school, Nancy falls asleep in class and dreams that a man is chasing her into the boiler room, where she is cornered. She then deliberately burns her arm on a pipe. The burn startles her awake in class, and she notices a burn mark on her arm. Nancy visits Rod at the police station, where he describes Tina's death along with his own recent nightmares about the same man stalking her in her dreams, leading Nancy to believe that the man killed Tina. At home, Nancy falls asleep in the bathtub and is nearly drowned by the man.
Now that is an iconic shot with the glove just coming through the water. It's like Jaws.
It is such a good shot though. But who falls asleep in the bathtub?
Oh, I don't know. I sometimes try and make toast in there. Nancy then relies on caffeine to stay awake and invites Glenn to watch over her as she sleeps. Now that's a really fucking dumb idea, because Sweeney Todd over here is always dreaming about being a bastard pirate. In a dream, Nancy sees the man preparing to kill Rod in his cell, but then he turns his attention towards her. Nancy runs away and wakes up when her alarm clock goes off. The man kills Rod by wrapping bedsheets around his neck, staging it as a suicide by hanging. At Rod's funeral, Nancy's parents become worried when she describes her dreams. Her mother Marge, dropping the bottle for 30 fucking nanoseconds, takes her to a sleep disorders clinic where, in a dream, Nancy grabs the man's fedora with the name Fred Krueger written in it and pulls it into the real world. Now, I'm all for Fred marking his clothing, but it could have said anybody's name, in fairness.
Really
I mean, his underpants may have said Steve McCoogan. Doesn't necessarily mean it's true. After barricading the house, Marge explains that Krueger was an insane child murderer, not a pedo. 2010 remake. Fred Krueger was a lot of things. He was a wrong'un.
We didn't need to go there.
He wasn't a kiddie fiddler who killed 20 children but didn't touch them in the bum, but was released on a technicality and then burned alive by the victims' parents who lived on their street, seeking vigilante justice.
Nancy realises that Krueger, now a vengeful ghost, is killing her and her friends out of revenge and just to be a bit of a dick. Nancy tries to call Glenn to warn him, but his father prevents her from speaking to him. Glenn falls asleep and is killed by Krueger.
That is the blood, guys! Ah!
It's brilliant just seeing that blood explode out of the bed.
The fun thing with this kill in particular. Now, with Tina's kill, they rotated the room on a set, and they used the same kind of setup for this kill, but the weight of the blood hitting the ceiling was so much, it started to turn again, and you see the blood just starts dripping like on a random angle. It's
brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the most iconic films of all time.
Now alone, Nancy puts Marge to sleep and asks Don, who is across the street investigating Glenn's death, to break into the house in 20 minutes. Nancy rigs booby traps around the house and grabs Freddy Krueger out of her dreams and into the real world.
I want to believe that Nancy and Kevin McAllister share a universe.
The booby traps affect Krueger enough that Nancy can light him on fire and lock him in the basement.
Ghostface doing a Krueger stunt.
No.
Kudos if you get that reference.
Nancy rushes to the door for help. The police arrive to find that Krueger has escaped from the basement. Nancy and Don go upstairs to find a burning Krueger smothering Marge in her bedroom. After Don extinguishes the fire, Krueger and Marge vanish into the bed. When Don leaves the room, Krueger rises from the bed behind Nancy.
Realizing that Krueger is fueled by his victim's fear, she calmly turns her back on him, and Krueger evaporates when he attempts to lunge at her. This is where the film should have ended. Nancy steps outside into a bright foggy morning where all the friends of her mother are still alive and well. Nancy gets into Glenn's convertible to go to school where the green and red stripe suddenly comes down and locks him in the car and drives uncontrollably down the street. Three girls, wired dress, one auntie, Freddy's coming for you, playing jump rope, here chanting Krueger's nursery rhyme, whilst Marge's mannequin grabbed by Krueger through the door at the front. Oh my god, that bit's so bad!
It is brilliant.
I hate that bit so much.
When you slow that down, you can just plainly see that it's just a shop window mannequin trying to be dragged through the wall.
5 years after Freddy Krueger's apparent defeat, the Walshes have moved into Nancy Thompson's former home. Their teenage son, Jesse, has a nightmare about being stalked by Krueger, who is driving a school bus. He wakes up and attributes the dream to the unusual heat in the room. Jesse goes to school with his friend Lisa, whom he is interested in romantically, but is too shy to flirt with her.
After getting into a fight with a boy named Grady during gym class, Coach Schneider has them stay after class and they become friends. Lisa comes to visit Jesse after school and they discover Nancy Thompson's diary, detailing her nightmares which are strikingly similar to Jesse's. Small fires happen around the house, accumulating in a spontaneous combustion of their pet birds. Jesse's father accuses him of sabotage. The following night, Jesse has a nightmare where he encounters Freddy, who tells him to kill for him. The dream grows more intense and Jesse unsuccessfully attempts different measures to keep himself awake.
He eventually begins wandering the streets at night. One night he is caught by Schneider ordering a drink in a gay bar, because that's illegal apparently, and is made to run laps at the school as punishment.
After sending Jesse to the showers, Schneider is attacked by an unseen force that drags him into the showers. Jesse vanishes into the steam and Freddy emerges, killing Schneider by slashing his back. Afterwards, Jesse is horrified to see the glove on his hand. He is escorted home by the police after being found wandering the streets naked.
That's how I'm usually found.
His parents begin to suspect that Jesse may be on drugs or mentally disturbed. Lisa takes Jesse to an abandoned factory where Freddy Krueger worked, but they find nothing there. The following night, Jesse goes to Lisa's pool party and kisses her in the cabana, but his body begins to change and he leaves in a panic. He goes to Grady's house, confessing to killing Schneider, and instructs Grady to watch him as he sleeps and to stop him if he tries to leave. When Grady eventually falls asleep, Freddy emerges from Jesse's body and kills Grady. Freddy then changes back to Jesse, who finds himself looking at Freddy laughing in the reflection of Grady's mirror. He flees before Grady's parents enter the room. Returning to Lisa's house, Jesse tells her what is going on.
Lisa realizes that Jesse's terror is giving Freddy strength, but he cannot stop fearing him and transforms again. Freddy locks Lisa's parents into their bedroom and attacks her, but realizes he cannot harm her due to Jesse's influence. Freddy goes outside where he begins to slaughter the party goers, and it's a massacre as well. I mean, Freddy is trying really hard to improve his KD ratio. Lisa's father emerges with a shotgun, but Lisa stops him from shooting Freddy, who escapes in a ball of flame. Lisa drives to the factory, facing sudden nightmares and having to control her fear before confronting Freddy.
She pleads with Jesse to fight Freddy, but Freddy's hold is too strong. When Lisa confesses her love for Jesse and kisses Freddy, Jesse begins to fight back. Freddy combusts and turns to ash, from which Jesse emerges. Later, as Jesse, Lisa and Lisa's friend Kerry are taking the bus to school, Jesse begins to notice similarities to his original nightmare and panics. After Lisa calms Jesse down, Kerry says it is all over, just before Freddy's clawed arm busts through her chest. Freddy laughs as the bus drives into the field, just as Jesse's first nightmare. A year after the events of the previous film, teenager Kristen Parker dreams that Freddy Krueger is chasing her. He attacks her in her bathroom, after she thinks she has already awoken, making it look like she has slit her wrists in the real world. Believing that Kristen is to be suicidal, her mother admits her to Western Hills Psychiatric Hospital, where she is placed under the care of Dr. Neil Gordon. At the hospital, Kristen fights the orderlies who try to sedate her because she has fear of falling asleep. The new intern therapist, Nancy Thompson,
Nancy's back!
calms her down and befriends her by reciting part of Freddy's nursery rhyme.
Nancy is introduced to the rest of Dr. Gordon's patients. Philip, a habitual sleepwalker. Kincaid, a tough kid from the streets who's prone to violence. Jennifer, a hopeful television actress who's prone to cigarette burns. Will, he uses a wheelchair due to his prior suicide attempt. Taryn, a recovering drug addict. And Joey, the youngest, who is too traumatized to speak. Kristen, who is in bed drawing the Elm Street house. As she begins to doze, the door to her room creaks open and a red tricycle, not from Saw, wheels in before melting on the floor. She edges out of the room and finds herself back in the house. A stale, barbecued pig with an apple in its mouth is on the table. Flies buzz around it before it leaps out at her. Kristen explores as a lump appears under the carpet and gashes in the walls. A huge fucking Freddy snake bursts out the floor and begins to eat its way up Kristen's body.
That is brilliant. She screams for Nancy, and we see Nancy startled from her sleep. She looks at Kristen's model, which she has taken home with her, and hears Kristen scream again. Nancy passes out and falls through the chair to find herself in Kristen's dream. Nancy grabs a shard of broken mirror and stabs it into the eye of the snake, causing it to drop Kristen.
You!
Freddy hisses. Unable to believe it, Nancy grabs Kristen and begs her to run. They hide behind a door and Nancy tells Kristen to get them back out. They disappear as Freddy crashes through the door and Nancy awakes, back in her chair with a cut on her hand from the mirror. Kristen reveals that she has been able to pull other people into her dreams since she was young.
One of Philip's puppets comes to life. They didn't inform me before, he's also a puppeteer. Morphing into a mini Krueger. The stop motion here is incredible.
Absolutely brilliant.
Making its way to Philip's bed, turns into Freddy. Freddy cuts the veins in Philip's arms and legs, creating puppet strings. Kincaid sees Philip being manipulated out of the room, but thinks he's sleepwalking and doesn't wake him. Freddy makes Philip walk out of the ward and up the hospital tower. Joey sees Philip standing on the edge of the ledge, waking Will and carrying him to the window. Joey tries to get help, banging a tray as he runs down the corridor to wake people. Will shouts from the window, trying to wake Philip. The group gathers around to see Philip fall to his death as Freddy cuts the strings, and this may be my favourite kill
It's
in
brilliant.
the Nightmare franchise.
It is a really, really cool kill, especially since they couldn't do anything about it.
It was just they were
There's
watching.
no way they could do anything.
These kids aren't normal meatbags
No.
here. They genuinely trying to help each other.
And they've got the feelings as well for him. You don't actually want to see him die.
When you see Philip just
Yeah.
walking, it's just it's
it's-
like he's doing a poor
oh,
Spider-Man
yeah.
impression and just like getting dragged. Oh my god, it's amazing. I may have a bit of a hard-on for that kill, but fuck me, it's creative and
It
I
is a very
absolutely
creative
love it.
Jennifer finds a cigarette, lights it, and then burns her hand to keep herself awake. She flicks through the channels, stopping on Dick Cavet's show, which has Zeze Gaber as a guest. After a few minutes, Cavet suddenly turns into Freddy and attacks Gober, after which the signal cuts out. Screams and a rhyme can be heard as Jennifer goes over to the TV.
Arms burst out of the side of the television and grab Jennifer before Freddy's head emerges from the top. Freddy shouts, "Welcome to prime time, bitch!" before fatally ramming Jennifer's head through the screen. I don't know which kill I love more!
That is a brilliant
Like
one.
this film!
It's just so cool. It's so creative with
love
every
it.
single kill. It's not just, oh, he's coming out with knives.
So
and
just like
slashing.
fingerknife slashing,
No.
or in the second one where they go on. We'll talk more about that at the end. But my God, prime time, bitch! And fun fact: Robert Englund, because he is a legend, he threw that line in on his own. That was not in the script.
In the next group session, Nancy reveals to the remaining patients that they are the last of the Elm Street kids, the surviving children of those who banded together and burned Krueger to death many years ago. Dr. Gordon sets off a perpetual motion device, and the ball bearings break away and float around the room, revealing that they are actually dreaming despite initial appearances. Neil struggles to believe till Will stands up. In his dreams he can walk and is the wizard master. Kristen is able to backflip and somersault in her dreams.
Her dreams are shit.
Kincaid is super strong and Taran is beautiful and bad. Joey is in his room with the nurse. She asks him to unzip her uniform, revealing that she is topless underneath. Asking if he likes her body, Joey nods enthusiastically. She pushes him back to the bed and kisses him, before biting his tongue and pulling it from his mouth. Tongs are used to bind Joey's wrists and ankles, and the nurses are revealed to be Krueger. Feeling tongue-tied, he asks, the mattress disappears to reveal a hell pit. At this moment, the others realise that Freddy is close by and he has Joey. The room morphs into a boiler room, despite Kincaid's attempts to stop it. The screams alert Dr. Sims, who is not happy. Joey is on the floor, seemingly in a coma. Nancy and Neil are relieved of duty.
A nun named Sister Mary Helena tells Neil that Freddy is the son of a young woman on the hospital staff who was accidentally locked in a room with hundreds of mental patients and who was forced upon continually. She explains that the only way to stop him is to lay his bones to rest. He and Nancy ask her father, Officer Donald Thompson, where the bones are hidden, but he is uncooperative. Nancy rushes back to the hospital when she learns that Kristen has been sedated. Neil stays behind to convince Donald to help them. Nancy and the others engage in group hypnosis to reunite with Kristen. Kristen is back in her bedroom working on the model house as she was the night of her suicide attempt. She is surprised as her mum bursts in and the night repeats itself. She gives her mum a huge hug, telling her that she's had a terrible dream. She asks her mum to stay with her, but mum has a guest. This time it turns out to be Freddy, who rips Elaine's head off, and the decapitated head admonishes Kristen for her attention-seeking behaviour.
Freddy tries to stab Kristen, but she uses her gymnastic skills to evade him. She jumps out of the window, but instead of landing outside, she finds herself in the Elm Street house, rolling down the stairs. Getting to her feet, Kristen calls for Nancy. She is heard by Terran, who tries to find her, instead finding herself in an alley. A wall appears behind her, with Terran and Freddy in a heart sprayed on it, trapping her. Terran is shot by Freddy, who says, "Welcome home, look familiar?" Terran uses flick knives to fight Freddy, stabbing him in the stomach. Freddy asks her, "Why are you fighting when they are all friends?" and holds his hands up to reveal syringes of blue liquid instead of blades. Terran backs away as the injection marks on her arms begin to suck. Freddy plunges both sets of syringes into Terran, throwing her aside dead. "What a rush," he declares. Will finds himself in a long passageway. He calls out for the others, hearing Freddy laugh. He turns to find a wheelchair. Freddy invites him to sit, reminding him he will be back in it when he wakes up. The chair chases Will, causing him to fall.
He calls on his wizard master powers. Rising to his feet, Will shouts, "In the name of Lorik, Prince of Valves, demon be gone!" and blasts Freddy with green light.
He runs towards Freddy, who grabs him. Saying he doesn't believe in fairy tales, he plunges his blades into Will's chest, killing him too.
Kristen continues to search for the others, finally finding Nancy. The wall to the room begins to break and Kincaid is revealed, using his super strength to reunite with them. They embrace and Kincaid shouts for Freddy. He actually takes a piss and calling him all kinds of names. He's got bigger fucking balls than I've got. A door to the boiler room appears behind them. Nancy leads the way down a spiral staircase to search for Freddy. The trio rescue Joey, but are unable to defeat Freddy because he's become too powerful due to the souls that he has absorbed. Sensing that his remains have been found, Freddy appropriates his own skeleton and kills Donald before incapacitating Neil. Freddy returns to attack the others, but Joey uses his dream power voice to repel him. Donald tells Nancy that he is crossing over, but is revealed to be Freddy and stabs Nancy in the stomach, tossing her aside. Freddy, believing that Nancy is dead, comes upon Kristen in order to kill her, but a still alive Nancy stabs him with his own glove. Neil manages to recover and purifies Freddy's bones, killing him. After Nancy dies, yes! Fucking... Nightmare 3 has the balls to kill Nancy. Kristen manages to awaken everyone and return them to the real world.
During Nancy's funeral, Neil finds Amanda Kruger's tombstone and discovers that she is Sister Mary Helena. That evening, he goes to sleep with the Malaysian doll Nancy gave him and Kristen's papier-mâché house nearby. Suddenly, Kristen's house lights up from the inside, suggesting that Freddy is not completely defeated.
Kristen, Joey, and Kincaid have all been released from Western Hills Asylum and are now living a normal life, attending high school. Kristen has managed to make some new friends. Alice, a young bright girl who's a frequent daydreamer. Sheila, a brainy quiet girl with asthma. And Debbie, a tall tough girl who works out and hates bugs. She also has found herself a boyfriend, Rick, a martial arts enthusiast who's also Alice's brother. These are genuinely the only character traits that they give these characters. Kristen begins to have bad dreams and feels as though Freddy has once again come back from the dead. During one of her nightmares, she pulls Kincaid and Joey into her dream as he explores the deserted Elm Street house. In the next school day, Kincaid and Joey confront Kristen about pulling them into her dream without their consent. Kincaid wakes up one night and finds himself locked in the trunk of an old junked car. When he opens the hood, he realizes that he's in the same salvage yards that Freddy's body was buried in. Kincaid spies his dog, Jason, wink, digging and urinating fire in the ground nearby. Freddy then resurrects from the ground, after which a pile of junk downs crash upon him. Freddy quickly recoups and kills Kincaid. Later that night, Joey is also killed by Freddy by dragging him into his waterbed and drowning him. It's actually a really, really cool kill, and it's a great kill in a pretty naff film. The following day at school, Kristen is concerned when her friends fail to show up for class. She confides to Alice about nightmares. Kristen hits her head and passes out when she discovers that both her friends are missing, being attacked by Freddy but revived in time. After she learns of the deaths of Kincaid and Joey, Kristen goes to the actual Elm Street house with Rick, Dan, and Alice. Rick tells Dan the story of Freddy, and Alice reveals a part about the Dream Master spell. Alice suggests to Kristen that she is in control of her own dreams. However, Alice also looks down to the ground to see something, a chalk drawing of the house that only Kristen has been able to see. Clearly she senses something. At home that night, her mother gives her a sedative to help her sleep. When Kristen falls asleep this time, on Alice's advice, she tries to convert her nightmares into pleasant dreams, but to no avail. While she meets a child named Alice in her dream, creating a sandcastle, even in her good dreams, Freddy appears and ruins everything. Kristen eventually finds herself in Freddy's boiler room. It is explained that Kristen is the last child from Elm Street, and Freddy needs her help to get more children. When Freddy is about to kill her, she screams for Alice, Alice appears suddenly in the boiler room just as Kruger kills Kristen by throwing her into the fire. Before Kristen dies, she sends her power, the power to pull people into her dreams, to Alice. Before the power can reach her, it passes through Freddy first. Yeah, we're absolutely doing this, and I'm not on board with it, but we gotta rock with it, whatever happens. And that is the last of the Dream Warriors as well, which makes me sad. Alice awakens immediately, realizing that Kristen's in danger. She turns out to be right. Kristen's room is on fire. As Alice tries to understand what has happened and who exactly Freddy is, her friends begin to die. First, Sheila is killed by Freddy deflating her in a dream, which leads to her suffocating. It's a brutal, brutal kill, and I'm actually all for it. Then Rick is killed by Karate Floating Glove. This scene was shot after the film had finished, and there was already a burial scene for Rick, and they had no money for this. It was just a floating glove attacked him whilst he was doing karate with bedsheets in the background. Let's just pretend it didn't happen and move on. Yet after every death, including Kristen's, Alice picks up new talents and abilities. She also picks up the dream powers of the children who have died. She is obviously Freddy's supernatural opposite, albeit too weak to truly conquer or even resist him yet. After his death, Alice teams up with Dan Jordan, who was one of Rick's closest friends. Together with Dan, Alice tries to get Debbie, their last surviving friend, before Freddy finds her. Unbeknown to the two teams, Freddy is able to control their movements, trapping Alice and Dan into a time loop, which is honestly the best part of this bad film. Freddy is able to reach Debbie and kill her, firstly by breaking her arms at the elbow whilst lifting weights, because in her character synopsis she likes to exercise and hates bugs. Then by transforming into a cockroach. Oh my god, not only did he ruin her gains, he also turned into a bug, which he hates. And then trapping her inside a roach motel and crushing her before Alice and Dan could intervene. Following a car accident where Dan is injured and rushed to the hospital, Alice returns home to prepare for one final battle with Freddy. Alice goes to sleep to help Dan before Freddy can kill him. As Alice and Dan search for Freddy, Dan is injured. Alice wills him awake right at the moment the doctors wake Dan and he is pulled from Dreamworld. Alice, facing Freddy alone, attempts to use all of her newly absorbed abilities against him. The fight is relatively equal, except that she has a mortal body and he has not, giving him the advantage of immortality. It's an advantage that proves nearly too great to overcome. He declares that he's been guarding his gate for too long to be taken down by her. But just as he's preparing to kill her, she recalls the final verse of the Dream Master spell. For the first and only time, someone defeats Freddy by using the power of the spell to make him see the evil that's inside of him. Yeah, this is happening. Using her powers as Guardian of the Gate of Good Dreams, which Kristen never was, nor was Nancy, apparently. Alice releases the tortured souls from Freddy's prison into the Gate of Good Dreams, where he can no longer harm them. Kruger's clothes fall lifelessly to the floor. The film ends with Dan and Alice at a fountain sometimes later. She tosses a coin to a witcher and makes a wish. As she and Dan depart, she decides to keep the wish for herself as Freddy's image appears and ripples left in the fountain from the tossed coin. Taking place almost a year after the Dream Master, Alice and Dan have now started dating and there is no sign of Freddy Krueger. Alice begins to have dreams of a young nun with the name tag of Amanda Krueger being locked away in an asylum full of maniacs. Upon graduating from high school, Alice and Dan plan their getaway to Europe. Alice has made some new friends: Greta, a supermodel in training, Yvonne, a future Olympic diver, and Mark, a comic geek. As Alice makes her way to work, she finds herself back at the asylum. Alice is wheeled into an operating room on a stretcher, wearing Amanda's uniform and screaming in pain. As Alice looks around, she sees Amanda Krueger on the table instead of herself giving birth, because that happens in this film. As the baby is delivered, Amanda clambers to get it. The baby breaks free from the doctors and escapes the room. Alice follows it into the church rectory, the same place that Alice defeated Freddy in the previous film. Before she can stop him, the baby finds Krueger's clothes and quickly grows into an adult. Amanda shows up to help Alice, but she's disrupted when Freddy slams the church doors closed on her. After these events, Alice finds herself at work, but 4 hours late. Alice immediately phones Dan, who leaves their friends and rushes over to the diner. Before Dan can make it, he falls asleep and Freddy forces him to drive into another vehicle. Alice, after watching Freddy take possession of Dan, faints in the middle of the street. At the hospital, she is informed that she is pregnant with Dan's child. While recouping, she meets a young boy, Jacob. Yvonne later informs Alice that there were no children on her floor, nor is there a children wards at the hospital. Kruger begins to kill Alice's friends one by one as they fall asleep. First, it's Greta, by forcing her to eat herself to death. Kruger then goes after Mark, and only after Alice drawing herself into Mark's dream does Mark start to believe Alice. Alice requests an early ultrasound for her baby, and she soon realizes that Freddy is using her child to get into her friend's dreams. Alice also discovers that Jacob is really her unborn son. While Alice is looking for Amanda's body, Yvonne is attacked by Kruger. It's only when Yvonne barely escapes Kruger, thanks to a little help from Amanda's soul, that she accepts what Alice has been telling her. Shortly afterwards, Mark finds a comic depicting the entire events at that point and is drawn into his own nightmare. While there, Mark sees an image of Greta and finds his dream power, the Night Prowler. He attacks Kruger, but is ultimately killed by Kruger and cut into pieces, literally as he was turned into the paper character from his nightmare. Alice sends Yvonne to the now abandoned asylum, formerly Western Hills, to release Amanda's soul while she sets out to free Jacob. Kruger pulls her into an MC Escher-like labyrinth to try and slow her down. Freddy goes back into hiding inside Alice and she finally catches up to Jacob. Upon the revelation that Kruger has been hiding inside of her the whole time, Alice forces him out but also almost dies in the process. After being released by Yvonne, Amanda arrives and instructs Jacob on how to defeat Freddy. Jacob, releasing the power that Kruger has given him, forces himself and Freddy to revert back to an infant. Alice picks up Jacob and absorbs him while the now infant Freddy tries to escape. Before he can escape though, Amanda picks him up and absorbs him back inside. Freddy begins to fight from within and the church doors close. A couple of months go by, Alice gives birth to Jacob and is finally at peace from nightmares. In the film's last scene, the children who appear throughout the series are used as omens of Freddy's presence and are shown humming a familiar song and wearing church outfits. They are next to Alice, her father, Yvonne, and baby Jacob. We then hear Freddy's laugh, indicating that he may strike again. I genuinely wish he didn't fucking bother. In 1999, 10 years have passed since the fifth film. Alice Johnson and her son Jacob have moved away from Springwood. Freddy Krueger has returned and succeeded in killing nearly all the children in the town of Springwood, Ohio. The only surviving teenager, known only as John Doe, finds himself confronted by Freddy in a dream and is knocked past the town of Springwood's city limits by Freddy. The city limits serve as a barrier that Freddy cannot cross, and the hole John makes when he goes through the barrier closes as soon as Freddy touches it. However, when John goes through the barrier, he hits his head on a rock and does not remember who or why he's watching this awful film. Why he's outside of Springwood. Meanwhile, at a shelter for troubled youth, Spencer, Carlos, and Tracy plot to run away from the shelter. John, after being picked up by the police, becomes a resident of the shelter and a patient of Dr. Maggie Burroughs. Maggie notices a newspaper clipping in John's pocket from Springwood. In an effort to cure John's amnesia, she decides it will be best to go on a road trip to Springwood to jog his memory. Tracy, Carlos, and Spencer stow away in the van in their effort to escape the shelter, but are discovered when John has an hallucination and almost wrecks the van just outside of Springwood. Tracy, Spencer, and Carlos, after unsuccessfully trying to leave Springwood, decide to rest at a nearby abandoned house, which transforms into 1428 Elm Street. Meanwhile, John and Maggie visit Springwood Orphanage and discover that Freddy had a child. John believes he is the child, because Freddy allowed him to live. Back on Elm Street, Carlos and Spencer fall asleep and become prey to Freddy. Tracy is awakened by Maggie, but John, who went into the dream world with Tracy to try and help Spencer, is still asleep. Maggie and Tracy decide to take him back to the shelter. However, on their way back, Krueger kills John in his dream, but not before revealing that Krueger's kid is a girl. As John dies, he reveals this information to Maggie. Tracy and Maggie return to the shelter, but they discover that no one remembers John, Spencer, or Carlos, except for Doc, who has learned to control his dreams. Maggie remembers what John told her and discovers her own adoption papers, learning that she is Freddy's daughter. Doc discovers Freddy's power comes from the Dream Demons, who continually revive him, and that Freddy can be killed if he's pulled into the real world. Yeah, we've done that for multiple films now. Maggie decides that she'll be the one to enter Freddy's mind and pull him into the real world. Once in the dream world, she puts on a pair of 3D glasses for the theatrical version of the film, which filmed in 3D during the climax, and goes into Freddy's mind. There, she finds out that Freddy was teased as a child, abused by his foster father, inflicted self-abuse as a teenager, and murdered his wife. Freddy was given the power to become immortal from fiery demons. After some struggling, Maggie manages to pull Freddy into the real world. Maggie and Freddy end up in hand-to-hand combat against one another. While Maggie continues to battle Freddy, she uses several weapons confiscated from patients at the shelter. Enraged by the knowledge of what he has done, she disarms him of his clawed glove. Eventually, Maggie stabs Freddy in the stomach with his own glove while she's close to him. Doc then throws Maggie a pipe bomb. After she impales Freddy to a steel support beam, she throws the bomb in his chest. As she runs away from the impending explosion, Freddy looks in the camera and says, "Kids," after which he explodes. The 3 dream demons are then seen flying about Freddy after the pipe bomb kills him, unable to revive him in the real world. Maggie then smiles at Tracy and Doc and says, "Wow, that was shit." Maggie then smiles at Tracy and Doc and says, "Freddy's dead."